This is a Voyescape podcast. You can find all of our travel podcasts from around the world at voyescape.com.
On today's episode of Travel in 10, we're going to the other side of the world, a city that is a perfect mix of urban sophistication, natural beauty, harborfront attractions like the Sydney Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, Circular Quay, a dynamic food scene, Michelin-starred restaurants, coastal walks, and a deep connection to Aboriginal history and historic sites. Today, we are going to Sydney, Australia. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Travel in 10 podcast is where we come to you weekly with tips on what to see, what to do, where to go in cities around the world. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Tim Johnson. Tim, do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the show?
Absolutely. Great to see you, David, as always. My name is Tim Johnson. I am a travel writer by trade. I've been writing about travel for more than 15 years. And during that time, I visited more than 150 countries. I've been to all 7 continents. Some places I've been many times. Antarctica, I've been 7 times. I've done about 40 different safaris in Africa. And I love travel and I love writing. And I'm always, in search of a good story. I've written for some of the biggest publications in the world, the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star here in Canada. I've written for the New Yorker and National Geographic and others internationally. And just really have been very excited to be a part of this podcast because I've joined up in the last year or so, the last couple seasons. David, thank you for inviting me to be the co-host. I know that you started this podcast many years ago, and if there's one thing that I love almost as much as travel, it's talking travel. And we've had the opportunity on many occasions here to talk to each other about some of our favorite cities in the world. And I know you've done a ton of travel too. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing travel podcasting since 2005, and this actually was one of the first travel podcasts on the Apple Podcast Store when we started it back in 2005, and traveled now to 50 plus countries. I think by the end of this year, I'll probably be up to about 55. Just got back from a trip to India and going off to Jordan here in about a week. So getting to do a lot of travel as part of working on the podcast, and as we build out our podcast network that Tim and I are working on as well, the Voyescape Podcast Network. And actually, Tim and I met in a trip in the area that we're going to talk about today, on a trip that we both did to Australia a few years ago. Australia is somewhere where I've spent a lot of time. I spent about a year living there when I first graduated from high school, working in Sydney with the Australian Wilderness Society and traveling up and down the East Coast. I've been back on some projects working with Tourism Australia, including the one where Tim and I first met and got to spend some time traveling together. And most recently, probably about a year and a half ago, on a spring break trip with my family, where we spent some time in Sydney as well. Tim, you've been to Sydney a ton as well, haven't you?
I have. Yeah, I've probably been at least half a dozen times to Sydney. Australia is one of my favorite countries in the whole world, and have had the opportunity to go, I'm going to say maybe 8 times to Australia. So I've done the Perth and the western side. I've been up top and done cruises through the Kimberley. I've taken the Indian Pacific across the country and done. We did together. I think we did Melbourne and Adelaide and Kangaroo Island and then also up through the Great Barrier Reef and the Whitsundays and up to Cairns as well and Kakadu and the Northern Territory. So really all over the country. And I think this is one of the few destinations, honestly, that we've covered. Mostly we talk about cities that I visited and you visited, and then we talk about it. I think that's one of the few places that we were there at the very same time. And so that I think that makes this episode extra special, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why Sydney? I mean, why would you say if somebody's planning a trip around the world, they're picking where to go for this spring break or another trip? What do you think makes Sydney unique?
Well, I think the pure beauty of the city is something. There are a few places that you can see so many icons, I think, by just turning your head. You can keep your feet in place and just turn your head. You've got the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You've got the Sydney Opera House, the Sydney Harbour. You mentioned Circular Quay. I mean, there is just so many things of beauty, places of beauty that are packed into this one big dynamic city. And I think the water makes a huge difference. I think, some cities have rivers and some cities have lakes, and Sydney has this massive harbor that is, it's like a living, breathing thing, right? You've got the ships going in and out, you've got cruise ships going in and out, ferries, and I think it's just one of these cities that is every moment that you're there, it's a different city. It changes by the second. And so I don't know. What do you think? What do you love about Sydney?
I mean, I think it's for sure one of the most livable cities anywhere in the world. It's a super modern, clean city, great shopping, great restaurants, tons of attractions, as you say, some really iconic, well-known things around the world. And also, I think one of the things that really makes Sydney special is it's just like a super lively city. The people are so friendly. For me, anytime I've been, doesn't matter what day of the week you're going out, there's something going on every night, right? There's lots of live music. The pubs are pumping there, and the Australians are a lot of fun. So it makes it a very fun city to go spend some time in. At the Sydney Opera House, I know somewhere we'll both talk about, probably one of the most iconic attractions. What do you think? Is the Opera House actually worth it? Does it live up to the hype? Worth going to spend some time at?
It is, and I will say, I have not been to a performance at the Opera House. I've seen it obviously from the outside, and I've seen it from the water. And I mean, it is one of these places, and you can probably count them on one or two hands that almost anyone in the world who's been exposed to media would recognize in a second. You've got Machu Picchu, Taj Mahal, places like that. Sydney Opera House, nobody's going to go, where is that? Like every city, like it is, I mean, it is an icon. And so maybe diving into some of our categories, even though I haven't been there for a performance, so I can't comment on the quality of the sound or anything like that. I have had lunch there and I have had dinner there because there are restaurants that are within the Opera House, and I think it's one of the best places that you can, if you're on a little bit of a budget. The House Canteen is a good way to get through the doors, and has a nice menu. The food there is good. If you want to treat yourself a little bit, you really want to get a feel for the Opera House. There's this restaurant called Bennelong, and their theme is Australia on a plate. So the atmosphere alone is worth it because you can actually feel those famous, they're almost like sails. So from the inside, you can actually see those arches, and then just a beautiful glass, shaped window that looks out on the water, and a bit of a focus on seafood, perfectly appropriate in the city on the water. So oysters, scallops, lobster. So that for me would be my top place to dine in Sydney, and a great way to get inside the Opera House, even if you're not into opera or into other types of theatrical performances. What about you? I know you have a few favorite places to dine.
Yeah, and I'll just say on the Opera House, I have had a chance to go to a few performances there, and it is very much worth it. And you can get tickets often day of. You can, they've got multiple different venues. It's not just a single, concert hall. There's multiple different concert halls in the Opera House. So lots of stuff going on there, and it can be quite easy to get tickets depending on what's going on the day that you're there. So that's definitely worth checking out or making advance plans for some of the more popular performances. The other thing about that whole district is, Circular Quay, where the Opera House really is kind of the heart of Sydney. It's where all the ferries come together. If you want to go out to Manly Beach, if you want to go out to Bondi, well, not Bondi, but Manly Beach for sure, and a number of other areas of the city, that's really the kind of the main hub connecting the whole city together. Stunning views of the Harbour Bridge from there. So that really is, I think if it's your first time in Sydney, you're going to want to start there. It's a perfect starting point for beginning your exploration of the city. I understand you got to do something that I haven't done, but that looks super cool at the Harbour Bridge. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did on one of my trips to Sydney, I did the Sydney Bridge climb, which is really, it's a little bit terrifying, I'll be honest. It is an experience where you climb more than 1,300 steps, and you actually climb on, if you can picture the Sydney Harbour Bridge, it's got this arch. You actually climb on top. So you walk out, you're clipped in. It's very safe. You're wearing a jumpsuit and you're tethered in and you're clipped in, and you walk out kind of at the bottom, and then you go all the way up the top of that arch, and you go all the way to the summit, to the apex of it. And I mean, there are no views of Sydney that will match that 360-degree views. But I'll be honest, I mean, those first, especially at the start, once you kind of get used to it, the wind and the conditions, and that you're so high up, the first few steps are a little bit of a leap of faith, but once you get going, I mean, it's really worth it. And we got, all the way to the top, and got some pictures that that are, unmatched. And so that was really a truly exceptional experience. And I will say the only other view, and it's another one of my favorite things to do in Sydney that maybe match that, is doing a float plane ride. There is a company that does seaplane float planes. I know you're from Vancouver. You live in Vancouver. You're very familiar with seaplanes and float planes. Great way to get out. And they'll do little scenic trips where you can get up and fly over the city and get some great photos, and then take your pictures, and then get back on the water. So, yeah. Do you have any other favorite things to do in town?
Yeah, maybe one a bit more obscure one that we did on our last trip that I really enjoyed is the Royal Botanic Gardens is very central in kind of the heart of Sydney, but they've got a really unique tour there. Their Aboriginal bush tucker tour, which is with a Aboriginal Australian guide who takes you out to really explore kind of Aboriginal history, native bush foods, and takes you through the garden to basically show you all the things that are edible throughout the gardens, and you get to sample them as you go as well. So I thought that was a great introduction to Aboriginal culture in Australia, and that's such an important part of the history of Sydney and the history of the country, and a great way to get some exposure to that as well. Lots of great art as well. New South Wales Art Gallery was a favorite in terms of again, if you really want to dig into Aboriginal art, that's a great spot to really get exposure to world-class art museum with some great iconic Australian art. And a bit of a tip there is if you go on Wednesday nights, it's both their late night gallery event on Wednesday nights, and it's free to get in as well. I'm not sure if it's always free, but on Wednesday nights for sure it is. So that's another great thing to do when you're there. And then maybe one last one I'll call out is, I think if you're in Sydney, it's a great sports town as well. They've got, rugby league games happening all the time, cricket games all the time. Rugby league is like at Alliance Stadium there. I think it's one of Australia's most beloved sports. Great atmosphere. Would highly recommend that if they've got any of the games going when you're in town as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there are any better sports fans in the world than Australians. I mean, they love their sports. I have done an AFL, or I've done a rugby league game, and I've also done an AFL game, Aussie rules football. I mean, that game it's a little bit baffling. The field is like, I don't know, like 100 acres. Like, it's massive, massive, massive field, but it's worth it. Even if you don't know the rules, even if you're not into the sport, to see the passion of the people next to you and around you, and how excited they are and cheering for their team. I think sports is one of those great areas of culture that we can access when we're traveling. And couldn't agree more. One more quick thing before we move on, because I know we want to talk about some hotels and things like that. We had a little discussion before we started recording, Bondi versus Manly, the two main beaches that you're maybe going to visit when you're in Sydney. I think we were in one accord on our thinking on this. And so which one for you? They're both great, but yeah.
Well, they're both worth visiting for sure. And I mean, especially if you're big into surfing, and this is, I think, one of the big attractions of Sydney is it's, one of the few cities in the world where you've got great surf beaches right in the city itself, and both Bondi and Manly are great for that. I know my kids did surfing lessons at Bondi, had a great time there, and I've been surfing at Manly and had a great time there as well. Bondi is definitely the more, I think, the better known of the two, right? And it's the one that you see featured a lot. I thought Manly Beach was actually, well, a nicer beach. and be just a bit cooler area as well. I thought in terms of restaurants and the weekend market there was fantastic. So if you're only going to go, I would go to both. But if you're only going to go to one, I would probably take Manly over Bondi. But what did you think?
I'm on the same page. I am. I mean, Bondi is beautiful, and I agree that they're both worth it. Bondi definitely is the one that gets the more of the ink and more of the press and more of the attention. And but Manly, I liked. I mean, I'm sure there's other ways to get to Manly. I was able to take a ferry. Maybe this is part of it. I took a bus to get to Bondi, and I took a ferry to get to Manly. So I definitely preferred Manly, and it did feel a little bit more low key. I felt a little bit, I don't know, like felt like a little beach town to me rather than this kind of, I mean, Bondi's beautiful, but very much, very developed and very glamorous in a way. And I thought Manly was a little bit more low key. So I definitely preferred that, and hold the thought on taking a ferry somewhere because I'm going to work that into my can't miss a little bit later. But before we do our can't misses, you've got some places that you like to stay. I mean, Sydney is a city that really has some fantastic hotels. I mean, some cities go, okay, there's a couple great hotels. Sydney is a place that has really a lot of great hotels. And I know you've got a couple on your list that, one that we both stayed at and at the same time. And yeah,
Well, as often, I'm often on our travels around the world taking advantage of my points, Marriott Bonvoy points. So the two places that I stayed, both part of that chain. One, the 4 Points by Sheraton in Sydney Central, which is kind of their mid-range hotel, but I thought actually one of the nicer 4 Points that I've stayed at there, and very reasonable price. But what I also liked about it is it's great access to quite a cool neighborhood, the Surrey Hills neighborhood, which had a lot of cool restaurants, good shopping, stuff like that in that district as well, and kind of a cool outdoor multi-restaurant, almost like food truck type place that we both went to called Spice Alley, which was just a short trip from the hotel as well. So that was a bonus there. And then on the most recent trip I was there, we stayed at the Sydney Harbour Marriott, which is a little, I would say a little worn, but the great part about it is super centrally located. Like you are probably less than a 2-minute walk from Circular Quay. You're right near the Rocks, the oldest part of Sydney, which has got some great bars and restaurants and stuff as well. You can see the Sydney Opera House from most of the rooms, and they've got a great executive lounge as well. So both good, solid options. And I understand you've got a couple of great places you've stayed there as well.
yeah, I mean, two of my favorite hotels, really, almost in the world, are there. Langham in Sydney is fantastic. I mean, a true beautiful 5-star hotel. I mean, and it's got all those amenities that make a beautiful hotel a beautiful hotel. Beautiful big suites, great concierge service. For me, what really set it apart was the personalized service. You would come in through those doors, and you'd be tired, you've had a big day, whatever, and you'd be welcomed by name. People would remember your preferences. If you'd mentioned the day before, that, I don't know, you'd love a bowl of soup or something. Oh, well, we got French onion soup tonight at the restaurant. Like they remembered. And there was that personal touch, and it did not feel in any way artificial. Like it really felt, I mean, and maybe this goes along with the city and the country, being a very friendly place. It felt like, a friend remembering your birthday or something. I don't know. It was fantastic. And then, I wrote an article a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, for CNN Travel. As you know, David, and maybe some of our listeners know, I am a man who enjoys a bath. And I wrote an article and a deep soaker tub. I love a deep soaker. It's almost one of the first things I look for when I get into a room. Is there going to be a deep soaker tub? And I wrote an article for CNN Travel ranking the best hotel deep soaker bathtubs in the world with a view. And number one on that list was Sofitel Sydney at Darling Harbour. And it is literally, you can slide into that tub, run the water, slide into that tub, and the whole city is right there out the windows, beautiful, beautiful views. So, and everything else about the hotel is fantastic as well. But if you're a person who enjoys a bath with a view, that, in my opinion, after staying in thousands of hotels, that's probably number one on my list for best view.
And one last thing I'll say about hotels, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that Langham's are an Australian a chain that started in Australia. I know I've stayed at one of their hotels in LA and elsewhere, but I'm virtually sure they originated out of Australia. And Australia's got some great chains as well. Ovolo, I know we've talked about in our, I think in our episode about Melbourne, they've got a Sydney property that's quite nice as well. There's a couple of different cool Australian hotel chains. So I would really try and seek those out if you're spending some time in Sydney as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. Because there are brands for sure. And I think you're absolutely right on that. That Langham started there. I've stayed there and also in Auckland, and then a couple, I think, in New York and a couple other places. But they do Langham right as well. And there are some great other Australian brands as well. So, what's your can't miss? So, what's your don't leave Sydney without.
Probably my can't miss is, and this is one that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think of when you first think of Sydney, is we've talked about it being a great destination for snorkeling, or sorry, for surfing. But another thing that you can do is snorkeling there as well, which is quite I think unique for a city of that size and a capital city, that you can actually find beaches that you can jump in the water and find coral, find tropical fish. Some of the best ones that I did were in that sort of Manly Beach area. Trying to remember the names. There was a Shelley Beach, a secluded sort of tranquil beach. Great snorkeling and diving there. Another area quite close to there called Cabbage Tree Bay Aquatic Reserve, which is a protected marine sanctuary. Great place for spotting marine life. So I always like getting out in the water, and to have a capital city like that, and such a big dynamic city that you can go both surfing and snorkeling in the same day, I think makes it pretty unique and pretty special. So that would be a can't miss for me. How about you? What's your can't miss?
Absolutely. And I think I asked everyone earlier to hang on to that thought about ferries. And I think that is one of my favorite things to do in Sydney. If I get up in the morning and I don't have a plan and I don't have any obligations, I'll just go down to Circular Quay and hop on a ferry. And it's a great, cheap way to see the city. You're on there with the commuters, but you're seeing, so you're seeing the city, the real heartbeat of the city, and you're going past marinas and beaches. And there's one that goes out to a place called Camp Cove. And you can get there. I can't remember if it's a half an hour, 45 minutes. I don't think it's certainly not more than that. And I don't know, $2-3 on the ferry or something like that. You get out there and it's this beautiful little crescent of beach. Great little restaurant right on the water, and you can swim, sunbathe. And I think the coolest part is that you feel like you are in a beach town somewhere, but you can actually look back across the water and you can see that glassy, iconic skyline of Sydney. So, you can see the city, and you can feel bad for all those suckers sitting in offices there while you're sitting on the beach and, going for a swim. So I think that's one of the unique and true pleasures of being in Sydney, is that, hop on a ferry and you can be in a whole other world in 30-40 minutes. So yeah. Yeah.
You see so many people there going out of Circular Quay on these sort of like dinner cruises and cruises, city cruises that they're paying $150-$200 for to go out for a city cruise, where a lot of times you're getting as good or a better view from those ferries, right? As you say, it's like $2-3 ferries. The one over to Manly, you get a phenomenal view of the Opera House. Some of the best pictures you're going to get at the Opera House are taking that ferry. Lots of great ferries there. Last tip I would add would just be a couple of ones around places to eat. I know we talked about a couple earlier in the episode, but a couple I missed. One is the Sydney Fish Market. Great place for some of the freshest seafood in Australia. A historic waterfront market. Again, it's like a short ferry ride from Circular Quay, gets you over there. So a great place for lunch or dinner. And then I also find that throughout Australia, it's got great sort of Pan-Asian restaurants all around Australia. We talked about a couple in Melbourne in our Melbourne episode. Probably my favorite that I was at in Sydney was a place called Long Chim, which I think is a Michelin starred or Michelin Bib Gourmand. Authentic Thai street food flavors, really lively setting, super cool place as well. So just a couple of last ones I would add as well.
Absolutely. No, great place to eat, great place to stay, and definitely heartily recommend this city. What an amazing place, and have enjoyed revisiting it with you, David. And hopefully maybe someday soon we'll both be back down there again together. But always fun to chat about it. So thanks so much for this excellent discussion of this beautiful city.
Thanks, Tim. Look forward to catching up next week. And as always, we would really appreciate if people could take the time to drop us a review or a rating on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you happen to listen to us, and to check out some of the other podcasts that we've partnered together with on the Voyescape Podcast Network with travel podcasts from all around the world that you can find at voyescape.com.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, Tim.
If you love travel, you'll love Winging It Travel podcast. Every Monday, I share stories from 75 countries, from backpacking tips, epic adventures, and plenty of travel inspiration. Alongside that, I host guest interviews every 2 weeks. Check it out at voyescape.com.